Do you regret going on the journey from maintenance to mission?
No, never. It's been challenging for sure. It's taken me to all sorts of different places, meeting different people like you guys. It's been exciting, but no, I would never regret it. It's been the joy of my priesthood. It saved my priesthood in many ways. I wouldn't do anything else.
Welcome to Magnified Ministry Podcast, the podcast dedicated to inspiring, encouraging, and equipping parish leaders to build thriving missionary communities in today's rapidly changing world. This is the Magnified Ministry Podcast. Welcome to the Magnified Ministry Podcast. I'm your co-host Marco, and I'm joined by my good friend Father Peter.
Hi, everybody.
We are so excited to have you back. We are starting our
new series.
series, right?
I'm so excited. You get excited because it's both practical and it speaks about something really central to us.
And the centrality of it is this idea of what's at the heart of renewal. And so we will actually be sharing some conversation amongst ourselves, but we're really excited you get to meet some of our favorite people that have been along for the ride in different things. And
That's
we'll
right.
hear a lot of stories.
So just recap, the first 3 weeks we listened and had a conversation around this shift from post-Christian to pre-Christian culture and opportunity that creates. Now we want to kind of zoom in on the parish leaders, on you, and ask ourselves, well, what is necessary for us in order not only to create a community that welcomes people, but also to sustain that community? So now the focus of the next 3 weeks is on us as parish leaders.
That's right. And what you'll hear us talking about in the next couple of episodes will be this idea of conversion at different levels.
That's right.
So as Father Peter mentioned, the next couple of episodes are going to be all about us and unpacking the core of renewal, conversion. It's so important for that to happen. So today we're going to unpack this idea of individual conversion. It starts with you. Then we will move into the idea of communal conversion. You can't do it alone. And then moving to organizational conversion. You got to get this whole thing moving in the right direction. So very excited to dive in. And I think for this specific episode, we wanted to start with a little bit of scripture.
That's right.
So I will be reading from Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh.
I love that. Don't you?
Why do you love that?
Well, who doesn't? I mean, who wants to have a heart of stone? You know, even as a child, when you watch cartoons, you know that the bad characters have a stony heart and good heart characters have a heart that is filled with love and compassion. And I think as Christian people, as followers of Jesus, we have to constantly check our hearts. Are our hearts really being refreshed and renewed by the Spirit of Jesus?
Can I ask you a bit of a challenging question?
Go.
Have you always had a heart of flesh?
Well, I think we all go through different stages of life when we find ourselves that we go from one side to the other, right? So there are days actually when you really are burnt out and tired, when I think it's hard to have a heart of flesh, right? And there are moments of uplifting days when you really do. So I don't think it's once and done. I think you have 3 kids. I bet there's days when you're so tired at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You just want to go to bed and there's not all that much excitement in your heart.
Right.
And then there are days when you're just filled
full.
with love for your children. And I think that's what God puts in our hearts as a love for one another, for people of God.
And I think in many ways, what it is that we're talking about today is this idea of conversion, right? Because I think what you're saying is our disposition, our heart disposition, if that's even a word, is not static. It's
That's right.
dynamic. It's always moving. But it can always be moving one way or the other. But we have the opportunity to actually help correct it if it needs to.
Exactly. And I always think about the method of Jesus. So how did Jesus help his disciples to get there? And I think there's no better story than going to the very beginning of the 24th chapter of Luke and listen to the story of disciples walking to Emmaus after resurrection, right? Because Jesus doesn't question them. He doesn't point out that they're idiots or that they're unwilling to convert. What he does is he enters into their pain, right? So they have stony hearts, like really overcame with grief. And Jesus doesn't question that. He lets them work through the grief, through the loss, and then he makes himself known to them in the breaking of the bread. And we know the consequence of it, that they return back changed.
They were changed. They had conversion.
But it's because Jesus accompanied them, right? So
Yes.
we as a church, we have to recognize that as church leaders, Jesus meets us as we are. I actually had this thought just the other day. So I will be speaking in the Diocese of Buffalo to the priests and lay leaders, and as they invited me to speak, they gave me a topic, and the topic
What's the
was,
topic?
yeah, I love it, church administration, finance, liturgy, and evangelization. And I said,
That is how did those
how do I cover it in 90 minutes?
Where do you start?
And then I started thinking, like, where do I start? And I
Yeah.
said to myself, what's my schedule as a pastor?
Yeah, that's
Finance every day, pretty much. Something has to do with sustainability of the church.
Yep.
Secondly, is leadership, right? How do I shape future leaders? Liturgy, I celebrate and worship God. And evangelization, I try to bring people to Jesus. So it seems like really disconnected. Truthfully,
It is
it's all
connected.
part of the same day. And so as a pastor, you have to find yourself as a church leader always in this place when you say, what is it that awakens my heart with love for Jesus and for God's people? And how can I do that every day? Find
Yeah.
those moments of uplifting experiences every day, so I don't fall into the routine of doing things I must do without my heart being on fire for Jesus.
And to your point,
And paying bills is not giving me much joy.
No,
Let me just tell
it's
you.
never fun to pay bills, but you need to pay bills. Otherwise, there wouldn't be light in the buildings and all that stuff. But one of the things that I heard you say that struck me is that you're doing this with a disposition that is joy-filled. Even though you don't like to do it, you have to do it, and you need to do it. But you are doing it because you wake up every day with a reason for it. And we've known each other for a long time, and I don't think that was always the way that you saw things, right? Not that you didn't see things, right? That's not what I mean. I just think your lens by which you look at the world and you look at your own mission and your own calling as a priest has changed because of the work of renewal and because of
Sure.
conversion that you've gone into. So
Mhm.
I'd like to just talk a little bit more about what conversion means, because for some of the people listening to us, they may hear conversion and think of the conversion of Saul and Paul. It's this like
Sure.
big moment, and that's where you
Yeah.
meet Jesus. But I'd love to just unpack conversion a little bit.
Well, I think for us as church leaders, right, because this, again, the podcast is dedicated to church leaders. So for those of you who are listening and on any form of leadership in the parish, leading ministries, being, ministers, to keep in mind that our hearts have to be filled with love for Jesus, right? If we don't do things that we do because we love Jesus, then we probably are not going to succeed. And I think that was my big aha moment, is like my freedom as a pastor comes from knowing that I absolutely am sure Jesus is present in our midst. He's risen, he's at work, and he calls us to take on his mission. And because we've done all this research, I am convinced that it would work in 100 and plus parishes that we study will also work here in a unique way,
Right.
but it will work. And that gives me a great freedom not to get worked out or over paralyzed when things don't go well, but to know, hey, in the end, Jesus is in charge. I have great peace of knowing that it's his project, not my project. And as a church leader, my job is to just do my part and recognizing that my part is just one little fracture. Like what
Yep.
what other people on our team at Clement do, I could never do because I'm not as attentive, I'm not as passionate, I'm not as generous. So it's building that team of people who can do things that I would never be able to do, all the way from communications to serving the poor, and recognizing that we all minister not only to people of God, but also to each other. And so I think that's a big call for every church leader of conversion, of saying, are you constantly of service, not only to the people you serve, but also to people on your team?
That's great. And it's this idea of freedom and joy. I think we talked about a lot about over the years, and it is this truly liberating concept that once you recognize and claim your identity
That's right.
as a son or daughter of God, you really are able to walk in freedom.
Absolutely.
And that is the fruit of the Spirit, and that is
Mhm.
fruit of deeper conversion. And so that's one of the things we're really excited to unpack with Father Brett here in a second, what that looks like practically.
Great. I think that's, cannot wait. So let's transition to our conversation, Father Brett. Welcome back, everybody, and we are overjoyed to have with us Father Brett Williams. Father Brett is a good friend of ours. He's from Durban, South Africa, and he has been really working on this spiritual renewal for a long time. Father Brett, tell us a bit about your journey towards renewal.
Well, thanks, Father Peter, for having me. It's great to be with you and Marco. It's always good to talk about these sorts of things, and I'm happy to do so. I think the first thing to know is that spiritual renewal, it's easily said and thought about, but it's actually hard work.
Yeah.
And it can be a bit lonely and a bit tough. But it is, as you and Marco have been saying, it is vital for us if we're going to lead renewal in our parishes, that we ourselves need, as leaders, to be renewed constantly by God's Spirit, by the grace that He gives us. And so, yeah, it's hard work, but it's also incredibly rewarding. So I'm always pleased to be able to come and share things and my ideas about it.
So when you in Durban, you had a lot of different roles. You work in the parish, you work in a pastoral center, you were a chancellor, you're acting vicar general, you were a pastor of a large parish. At what point have you recognized this kind of call to individual, personal conversion of saying, are we really doing our best in bringing Jesus to others? What's your story with that?
Yeah, good question. I think I realized I needed to focus on spiritual renewal and constantly converting myself, my heart, to what God was asking. When I encountered a really tough time in my ministry. I was in a parish that seemed really good, was working well, but it went through a really, really difficult time after I had arrived and found various problems. And for nearly 2 years, we went through hell, almost literally. And there were occasions that I wanted to opt out, to run away. In fact, I even asked the cardinal, "Yeah, please remove me from this." But I think facing difficulty, facing challenge, causes you to look into yourself, to look into what you're doing, listen to where God is calling you, and see the need for personal conversion and also personal renewal. I think conversion and renewal are essential for not only tackling good parts of our ministry, but also tough times. So I think by looking at the tough times, we're able to see sometimes more clearly where God is calling us and what He's challenging us to do. And in that, I realized that I needed to align myself more fully with God's will for me, for the parish that I was serving, and to find where He was calling us to be better, to be changed and converted as a community and more focused on the mission. Because I think in hard times, it's easy to forget the mission and where we're being called. It's in the hard times that you go back to those essential core things, I think.
So what did that come to Jesus moment
Yeah.
look like for you? And it probably wasn't one moment. It sounds like it was a set of experiences. Like what did it look like to be Father Brett during that time?
Yeah. Well, I was a lot thinner and had more hair. I think the decline into the scandal and the problems and the difficulties was quite rapid, and I think we stayed in this valley for a while. But as we moved through the difficulties and we started to resolve issues, it was a gradual emergence. But I think there came a time along that path where I recognized that, yep, things were getting better. We weren't quite in the darkest valley like we had been. But I was uncertain about where we were going to emerge, how we were going to do that. I don't think many seminaries equip priests to deal with chaos and upset and hurt, and then also how to emerge from that, how to come out of that, how to lead ourselves out of that, but also to lead the community out of that. I think so often seminaries have this idea that we go into reasonably perfect parishes. They're all pretty much the same. And so crisis management and dealing with issues and heartache is sometimes not so easy. And so I had to teach myself how to emerge from that. So I think the emergence from the pain and the division and the hurt was gradual. As you say, Marco, I think it took a bit of time. But I think there were two moments really that I can put my finger on that really jumped me further along the renewal and the healing process, and that was discovering Alpha, or being introduced to Alpha, and then discovering Father James Mallon's book, Divine Renovation. Those two really spoke to me and helped me to see how I could start this process of personal renewal and parish healing and renewal. And so in many ways, I credit those two, Divine Renovation and Alpha, with saving the parish, and making it a really vibrant parish, because by the time I left, I think it was a really vibrant parish, but also saving my priesthood and helping me to see where God was actually calling me to be faithful to the mission that he had given me.
That's brilliant. And when you think about it, in so many conversations over the years, people would say, hey, Alpha was originated in London, Divine Renovation is from Halifax, Canada. This will never apply to my community. So here you are in Durban, South Africa, and it does apply. So talk a little bit about the universality of it.
Yeah. Well, since my time here in Chicago, I've been here nearly 2 years now with you all told. You get to realize that there's many similarities in parishes throughout the world. Priests are the same. People are the same.
People is what I always say.
Exactly. So I think we mustn't underestimate that there is a certain degree of uniformity in the church amongst people and amongst parishes and bishops and priests. So I think on that level, there are many things that Alpha and Divine Renovation can speak to. You're right, Father Peter. I think that's a common criticism or pushback, especially in places like Africa where cultures are very different, that, this doesn't work in Africa. But I think we need to look always at the principles that are involved. And the reality is that I was ordained, and parishes are meant to be places of evangelization, of bringing people to Jesus. So what does that? What tools have we got to achieve that? And I think we need tools to do that. And Alpha is a tool. Renewal, leadership, all those sorts of things about organizations that we're talking about. I think those principles are universal. And I think both Alpha as a tool of evangelization and Divine Renovation that looks at organization and renewal. I think those are all common, no matter where you are. And I think to be able to identify what each parish, each community, each culture needs is important. We need to be sensitive to that. But I think the principles that undergird those sorts of organizations, and for example, the work that we do here at St. Clement, I think those are universal, and we can apply them in a careful way. Yeah.
That's great. Obviously, you've been here for 2 years. You left your home.
Yep.
You've gone through many different challenging situations, right? Ever since you said yes
Yeah.
to the Lord in obviously a long time ago when you said it to be ordained, but even in this journey of renewal. So why is it worth it, right? Like, why is it worth going through all of this chaos and challenge and pushback and opposition and long days and long nights for the sake of renewal? Like, why do you think it's worth it?
Good question. I've asked myself that many times.
It's like, one time I heard at one of the conference we were at, they talked about, the first Divine Renovation book was From Maintenance to Mission. They always said the second book would be From Mission Back to Maintenance. What the heck were we thinking? So it sounds like maybe you're starting the prologue.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's a parish priest in the world that has found it easy, and sometimes, does question what we're about and what God is leading us into. But I mean, if we look at the history of salvation, we look at the Old Testament prophets and leaders God has raised up through the centuries, over and over again, they've cried out to the Lord and asked, what am I doing here? Where is the way, the path that you're asking me to tread with this group of people? So it is sometimes, very often, difficult and challenging. So what makes it worth it? Why did we say yes in the first place? I know when people ask me, why did you become a priest? I always say, because God asked me to be. And I think that applies. I think always, and that's why personal renewal is so important, to go back to God, and to touch base, to get connected again with God's call, God calling us, and our yes. We constantly have to say yes to God. It's not a once-off thing.
Exactly.
So it's a going back over and over again. And when we go back, we're encouraged, we renewed, we say yes, and our motivation, our energy to confront all that lies before us is strengthened. We're able to do that because constantly we're going back to the Lord, asking for forgiveness where we've made a mess, and we do. I made a whole lot of messes.
Priests make mistakes.
Oh yes, yeah. I know it's hard to believe,
It's really hard to believe,
especially a saintly one like myself. But we make mistakes and we get it wrong, and so we need to ask for forgiveness from God and from people whose toes we step on and disregard unintentionally. And so when we do that, we start to be healed, and we start to refresh the motivation we have, and we remember why we said yes in the first place. It's God who asked us, and we're saying yes to God. So I constantly have to remind myself of that. The psalmist says, in vain does the builder labor if God is not the builder.
That's right.
And so it's about God working in us as individuals, but also in the community that helps us to progress. Yeah.
And for us, in a Catholic tradition, obviously, one of the most important images is the image of the Last Supper, right?
Yeah.
It's the community sitting around Jesus, participating in his very presence. And I think the renewal strongly suggests we have to think about community co-ownership.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to all the parish leaders listening to us around this topic of just distributed leadership and co-ownership for the parish?
Yeah. I'm a great believer in collaborative ministry, that we do have to do it together. I'm very aware that I just don't have all the skills necessary. I would love to have it all and to be able to do it. But the reality is I don't. And so if I'm truly a pastor, if I'm truly caring of my community and I truly believe in what God is asking of us, then I want the best for that community. And I know that I can't always do that. There are others that will work with me. And by doing that, then the best will be achieved for the community. If I exclude others, and they can be difficult people, and I can be difficult, I'm sure. If we exclude others, then there's no way the best for that community is going to be achieved. It's by working together that the best happens. And I think a great deal of trust, Father Peter. I think trusting God and trusting one another. And I think taking my sabbatical and coming here to St. Clement for the first time and spending time with you guys here, I had to leave the community. That was about 6 years into renewal. I had to leave them for a year and hope and pray that they could carry on without me. And so there are tests that come along that we should take advantage of to see, it's not all dependent on the priest. Unfortunately, my parish did really, really well. They didn't collapse into a heap. They continued the mission. They continued working together. Sure, we need all of us there. So my being absent certainly had some effect, but it progressed nicely. And so I think equipping others, working with others, maybe it's not something priests are taught in seminaries. I don't think it always comes easily to us as priests. I don't think the structure of the church is always conducive to making that happen easily. But that's where we've got to be a little bit innovative. We've got to push a little bit. We've got to be a little bit disruptive. I think those are all good things. I think Jesus was those. I think he was a little bit disruptive. He pushed things. And I think we've got to be willing to do that to ensure that the gifts of all people are shared and used in the work of mission. Yeah.
It's brilliant. So if, as we finish up this episode, what would be kind of 2 or 3 suggestions for the parish leaders you would have as they think about even beginning this work, right? Something that we universally hear is so many people say to us, I'm not a pastor, I cannot make a call, and yet I really want it. And we see it. We see that more and more lay people want to drive this renewal.
Yeah.
So what would be your suggestions to them?
So, first of all, to be really sure of what God is doing in you and what God is calling you to do. I think each one of us has been gifted by God for the spread of the gospel. Yeah. And our baptismal promises that we make call us into that and affirm us in the work of mission and spreading the gospel. But for each of us to be convinced of that, what is God asking of me in this mission? What part have I got to play? And then to try and be faithful to that. I have a saying, and I've got to say it to myself over and over again, stay in your lane, Do what God is calling you to do. What is your vocation? So I think to be sure of that. To know that it's going to be tough at times. It might be lonely. People might think you're stark raving mad, crazy to be doing what you're doing. So you get pushback. You get things that don't excite others. But you've got to maintain your excitement. That, as I said, comes from being attached close to God and knowing what God is asking of you. So to be prepared for that, to be humble and to accept that, you are going to get it wrong. And then I think two very important things: to be authentic, to be a person of integrity, and then to be able to laugh at yourself. Hey. The joy of the gospel. And I think you said at the beginning, hey, Marco, some things are tough, we may not always be happy, but we can always be joyful. And I think that joy needs to be there, which very often means that we have to laugh at ourselves, that we don't take ourselves too seriously, that we don't take offense too often from other people's craziness. And so I think a lot of humor, and I know here at St. Clement there's lots of laughing and craziness, but that's good. So I think those are things that we can all do. That's not dependent on the priest. I think that's what all of us who are dedicated to renewal mission can do and behave. I think that's important.
It's brilliant.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, thank you, Father Brett, for taking the time and joining this conversation.
Pleasure, Marco.
One of the things I remember you told me a couple years ago was that the work that God wants to do through you is really important.
Yeah.
But the work that he wants to do in you is even more important. Yeah. And I think that's just kept coming to my mind as you were talking, Father Brett, that God wants you, your heart, and then your actions.
Yeah.
So I think it's important as we talk about conversion, individual conversion, start inward to then go outward.
Brilliant,
So thank you again,
Pleasure.
Father Brett.
Good to be with you guys.
It's always fun. I think in the next episode, we're going to continue this theme of
now we'll
conversion.
talk about communal conversion. We'll have some of our leaders here from St. Clement,
Yep.
and we'll talk a little bit more.
That's right. And so, again, we always encourage comments, questions. Feel free to post them on the chat, send them our way, and also be on the lookout for some resources to unpack a little bit more of what Father Brett talked about this individual conversion. We'll see you next time.
God bless.
Cheers, guys.